Good day, YouTube. Welcome back to my neck of the woods. My name's Deco, where I share my experience and knowledge, hoping to lessen your learning curve along the way. So today I'm going to talk about the rut and the second rut and whether or not it's a real thing, which it certainly is, but it doesn't happen to everybody. Everybody talks about, well, the second rut's coming, we're going to get that chance or whatever, but it doesn't happen in every section of woods or for every deer herd, and I'm going to tell you what I think about it. But before I get started, please subscribe to my page, like my videos, and make some comments, good or bad. You know that I like the comments. All right, so our second rut. When does it happen? And if it happens, usually it happens about 28 days after whenever the peak rut is. Here in Massachusetts, I think it's like early November, maybe like around the second week in November. I think so. I always found like November 16th is a crazy day in the woods. Almost every time I go in, I see lots of activity. But that's just me. I don't know exactly when the peak rut is. I would say it's the first, maybe second week in November here where I hunt. So why is it going to happen? It's going to happen when the does, the adult does, are not bred in the first in the first rut. Now that's not necessarily a good thing to have a second rut. And I encourage everybody to kind of almost be a conservationist first and then a hunter second, so you can recognize if there is a second rut in your woods. And if there is, and if it's because of mature does not being bred, that just means your buck ratio is off. It means that the amount of bucks are either they had already been harvested, or there's just not enough of them to breed the does. Therefore, 28 days later, after your peak rut, the mature deer are going to go back into estrous and then hopefully be bred again. And it's a myth, as far as I know, as far as I've learned, that all does get bred. They don't. It depends on the herd. It depends on the amount of, the ratio. If you have a ton of bucks and only a few does, there's going to be a lot of aggressiveness. There's going to be a lot of fighting. You're going to see a lot of rut activity, and all the does are probably going to be bred, and there won't be a second rut, even though people think that there's just automatically a second rut, which is strange to me to just to assume it. But so as I said, I encourage you to get out in your woods and learn more about the deer that you're hunting. Like I always do, I'm always trying to improve myself. So if there are not enough bucks to breed the does, the mature does, they go, and it doesn't have to be mature does. All the does that went into estrus that weren't bred, 28 days later, they're going to go into estrus again, causing this second rut. And you usually notice it in your woods when the scrapes start to become active again. And because say like early December, everything sort of dies down. You don't see much activity anymore. And all of a sudden, it just heats up again. Those new rubs show up, and the scrape lines and everything just starts to heat up again. And some hunters do witness second rut activity. Not everyone does, and not all woods do, as I've said before. And it's not always a good thing that your buck ratio is off. So if for example, say we did have a second rut, and you're noticing that there's a lot of mature does being chased, and maybe they're being chased by younger bucks, non-mature does, because maybe the mature bucks have already been harvested. In one of the parcel of woods that I hunt this year, everyone got a great buck. I got a great buck, and everyone got a great buck, and that's usually not the case every year. And that's probably because all the does are being bred. Now, what could have happened in the woods is maybe a lot of these does were taken in October before the rut. So maybe we had a second rut because a lot of the mature bucks had been harvested. It depends. Where I hunt, Fish and Wildlife, they guesstimate that it's anywhere from 80 to 100 deer per square mile. So I'm really sure it's not a problem here. So as I said, I encourage you to try to recognize your woods and whatnot. So the other reason as to why we have the second rut is, and some people think it's a good thing. I'm not really sure if it is a bad thing. So the yearling fawns, they will come into estrus later in the season. and it's based on their maturity. And it's usually because they have like great nutrition, or they were born at like the right time, and they had great nutrition, and they were just healthy. And I believe it comes down to weight. The weight of the yearling doe brings them into like a sexual maturity, and then they can breed. And it's usually later in the season, like in December. It has nothing to do with the first rut. So it could be they come into estrus in January when our season is over, or they go into estrus in late December, or they go into estrus. It's whenever that yearling hits that sort of peak weight that brings them into sexual maturity. And there could be multiple yearlings that hit that peak weight at different times of the year, of the season. So it not necessarily falls into hunting season. In some areas of the country, the breeding season goes well into February, even though the peak rut might have been in November. A lot of these yearling does come into estrus in February or January, which in turn, right now people say that's a good thing. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it. Please put in the comments what you think. I'd love to know what you think. I think any deer that is going to be born late kind of misses the boat. And let me explain what I mean. So a deer that is a mature doe that is bred later in the season is going to have a fawn born late. It's not going to be born in this sort of peak area of the spring where a lot of things are born in the woods. Everything from birds are born at that time, fawns and other animals. A lot of things sort of rebirth, sort of are born in the spring. So if it's not born then, and it's born later, say it's born a month later, or say it's born 2 months later, it's not going to have the protection from predators that other fawns born earlier have. And then in turn, so say that doe gives birth later. Say it gives birth in June or July. I would think that doe, that mature doe, may go into estrus later, and it goes into a weird cycle. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not too sure about that. Please put in the comments anything about that. But when it's born later, when all the fawns are born at one time, say there's a ton of fawns, they're all born at one time, they have this sort of protection from predators, meaning there's a window of opportunity as to when a fawn can really be taken down by a coyote. Or we don't have wolves around here, and we don't have a lot of bear either. But say they've been taken down by a coyote until it's old enough to actually really run away. And there's only so many that can be eaten in that window. But if they're born later, the chances of it surviving are lowered because it doesn't have this sort of protection of a whole bunch of fawns being born. It's just one lonely fawn out there. So my sort of take on why it's happening. So when things are born later, they don't have the I don't want to say the proper nutrition, but they don't have the nutrition that happens during the springtime. And maybe it has to do, maybe the milk that's given by the does is different because the nutrition is different, and it just sort of throws things out of whack. And I think this is just, I don't know if this is a fact, I think this is just my opinion, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. So to wrap it up, yes, the second rut is a real thing, but it doesn't happen to everybody and not everyone's woods. These are the two scenarios in which I know of that the second rut comes into play. I'm not sure if there are more. I can't really think of more. Obviously, put in the comments anything that you think. But that's what comes into play. It comes into play that either the ratio is off, or so the ratio doesn't have to be off. It could have been that mature bucks were harvested prior to the rut, or too many of them. Or we can mess it up by harvesting too many young bucks also for the next generation. So say a whole bunch of mature bucks were harvested and a whole bunch of immature bucks were harvested. Then the next year, all those does aren't going to be bred. and they're going to be bred late, and we're going to have the second rut. Now, whether or not the second rut is a good thing or is a bad thing, and them being born later, I'm not really sure. I feel like it's a bad thing because it kind of throws things out of whack. It's not the natural sequence in which it's supposed to be, but let me know. That's all I have for you. Please subscribe to the page, like my videos, and make some comments. Thank you very much. Bye.